You're listening to the Comic Crusaders Podcast. I am your host, Al Mega, CEO of Comic Crusaders and Undercover Capes. In this show, I'm sitting down with creators from all walks of life to talk about inspiration, process, the lessons they've learned, and a whole lot more. Wepa! What up, mi gente? It's your boy, Al Mega. Welcome to a brand new Comic Crusaders Podcast. And today, we have an amazing guest. I mean, homie got uber skills. Before we get introduced to homie, let me introduce you to my co-pilot for Comic Crusaders that is kicking ass everywhere. I mean, involved in that Blow World Corey Indiegogo. All right, go check it out. Like, Blow World, real dope. All right, he's all over Cinema Crusaders, sloppy spoilers. He be really to meet the one and only Mr. Jeff Bracey. What's poppin', kiddo? How you doing?
It's good. It's good. Always good to be here, man. Like, you are the hardest working man in show business, and I'm just riding your coattails.
Nah, man. I do what I do, man, because we gotta bless and celebrate amazing people like yourself, and even like the guest that we have today. Because this guest, folks, he is Tony nominated. He is Marvel collaborating. He is a composer, a sound designer. He is kicking ass and not even taking names. He is smashing it in the business. The one, the only, Mr. Lindsay Jones.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Good to see you guys. Excellent.
What's poppin', brother? Thank you for coming on and hanging out with us today to talk a bit about your journey and this celebration. I mean, folks, you saw that background. I mean, if you have not been hearing this podcast, you've been missing out. If you ain't a Marvel fan if you've been listening to this. I mean, homie's designs in the background keep you in it. I mean, kudos, of course, to the people that act in it. But I mean, you know what I mean? You know what it is that really keeps you in there. Like, but otherwise it's just people blabbing. You know what I
mean? Yeah. Totally. Thank you for having me.
No, that's coming. So let's dive in, Lindsay.
Let's do it.
All right. So where you from originally?
Originally, I am from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I grew up in North Carolina. Yeah. And
another Carolina boy.
Another Carolina. Are you from there?
I'm from South Carolina, but I've got family in North Carolina. So
very nice. Yeah. So I'm originally from Winston-Salem, and I read comic books as a kid. My father had a comic book collection from when he was a kid. And so he passed it on to me. So, like,
is he the one that inspired you into this?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. He really brought about that interest in comics for me. And
he let you touch his books.
He did. You know what? I'm not gonna lie. His books were in pretty bad shape by the time I got them. Like,
yeah, I remember those are the days before bags and boards.
That's exactly right. That's right. He had them and they just were beat up, but he was like, here you go. You can have them if you want. And I remember reading like early episodes of Spider-Man and the Avengers and Captain America. And, oh man, I was just totally absorbed in it. I read them all day, every day for years.
Did you have a tribe growing up then? Or were you a solo wolf in your geekdom, if you will?
I definitely was a solo wolf. There was not a tribe for me. And, but that is okay. Man. Ultimately being a solo wolf has made me become independent and just sort of like a person who seeks out their own thing. So like, if you don't have a tribe out there, you can still make it happen.
Absolutely. You don't need no tribe, folks. It's the truth. All right. Facts.
You'll find your tribe eventually. You'll find them.
Eventually. So talking about that then. All right. So you're growing up out there in the Carolinas. I mean, what was early inspirations in life? What was it you were doing with your young self, if you will? Trying to, it was getting involved in this whole world in actual intention or was it just a happy accident?
So it's a little bit of both. So, I started off, I've been obsessed with music from the time I was a young kid, and my father.
What was your jam? What was your first one then? The one that you popped your cherry and you said, I love this.
Okay. The very first record I ever owned was The Mashed Potatoes by James Brown. Do the Mashed Potatoes. I had a 45 of that.
A 45, son.
I had a 45 of Do the Mashed Potatoes, and I would sit there and like the first time I heard James Brown, it was like someone from another universe was speaking to me. You know what I mean? Like an alien voice was just calling to me.
The Watcher was talking to you.
For the kids out there who don't know, a 45 is a little piece of vinyl as opposed to a big.
Oh yeah, right. Okay, so like the old days, right? You had vinyl, which vinyl's popular now. I think people know it. But 45 was like the smaller one with the big hole in the middle.
The adapter, right?
Adapter, put it on there, make it work. So yeah, man, I would listen. I had a little tiny record player, little kid's record player, and
Did you have a Fisher-Price record player?
Yeah.
That's what I had. Holy crap. Yes.
The Carolina Fisher-Price boys. There we go.
I love that. Yeah, man. So, just hearing James Brown's voice was enough to just inspire me for life. And so I've been obsessed with music on. And later on in life, I sort of started to move into acting and to become a performer. But I never lost my...
How did that even happen?
Well, I just was I was really interested in theater and really interested in acting. And I started to try and do it and, just try and work at community theaters, small theaters in my town. But I found when I was an actor that music always really still affected me. Like if I was in a performance and there would be music underneath me, I'd be like, oh man, I feel so energized or I feel so connected that way.
That's the
and
mood,
so
man.
Yeah, as I went to the North Carolina School of the Arts and I got a degree in acting. And then after that, I moved to Chicago. I was playing in a rock band at that time. And a friend of mine said to me, hey, we need some rock music for this show we're doing. Would you be willing to write this rock music for us? And I was like, yeah, sure, I can do that. And they're like, oh, also, can you do the sound design too? And I was like, I had no idea what that was, but I was like, okay, yeah, sure, no problem. So I sort of said yes and put it together. And that show wound up being a really big success. It ran for about 9 months in Chicago, which is a long time.
Check you out.
Yeah. So then I had all sorts of people calling me saying, hey, can you write music and create sound design for our show? And I thought, well, I'll just do this until the jobs dry up and then I'll go back to acting. And that was 28 years ago. I've been doing it ever since.
The well has never dried up, apparently. Oh, man. Go ahead, Jeff, man. I've been hogging up Lindsay, man, because, just check this out, man. He's talking about his well. Look at these wells. Go ahead, Bracey. Give it the floor.
I tell you, that's pretty remarkable. You go for one thing and then you end up finding a niche that you weren't expecting.
Totally.
And since you're in a rock band, part of my research didn't actually discover that. What was your instrument? What was your deal?
So I play bass in a band called the Nubile Things, which, by the way, my band is still around. If you can believe it, my band just celebrated 30 years of playing together.
Whoa!
Yeah,
really fantastic.
You're still rocking now. They're killing the mosh pits then.
Still doing it. Yeah, we just played over the Christmas holiday. We played in Chicago at the Beat Kitchen, and we'll hopefully have another gig sometime soon.
Now, do you just write the music, or do you write the songs as well? Do you write the vocals, the lyrics?
I write the lyrics and the vocals mostly for the band. There other guys in the band sort of help put it all together. So it's a group effort. But yeah, I'm sort of the lead songwriter.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, since everybody knows what a score is or a soundtrack for music, obviously, but since you went ahead and mentioned it, for those who are out there, what exactly is sound design?
Okay, so it's different for each genre. And I should say that I'm lucky enough to work in theater, film and TV, and podcasts and audio dramas like Marvel Wastelanders, which is the background that we're talking about today. So in sound design for each one of those things is slightly different. So I'll try and tell you about what each of those jobs are just really briefly so you have a basic idea. In theater, basically sound design is everything you hear in the theater. I'm responsible for hearing that, for you hearing that. So I create the sound effects, soundscapes. I create music for the show. I specify what the sound system is in the theater, where the speakers are located. I program all of the cues into a playback computer so that it can be played and sound the same way every night. And I work with the actors and the stage manager and the director to sort of make sure that the sound is really supporting the story. In film and television, sound design is kind of anything where sound is heard in a movie or a TV show a lot of that is created on the spot. So like if you see a film of a guy walking down the street, right? And it sounds like, you hear the sound of his footsteps. There is a 98% chance that guy's footsteps that you see on the screen is not the sound you hear. It is about putting in those sounds later to match his footsteps. And
this is called Foley.
That's right.
People don't
Foley
know.
is part of that sound design. And what you're trying to do is get the best sounding equivalent for what you see on the screen so that it sounds really natural, because a lot of times when you film stuff in real life, there's sound all over the place. There's like jets flying by or leaf blowers or whatever, messing up the sound of it. So you want to try and make it as quiet as possible so that you can then add all of these effects in.
How did you even get into all this? Were you just making random noises at the house one day when they told you to do this?
Yeah, it is like that. You get into a habit of like sitting in different places and just thinking like, okay, what do I hear when I'm in places, right? Like if I go out places, what do I hear in those places? And then when people are like, we've got to have the sound of like a shopping mall, right? Then you're like, okay, what are the different elements of things? I hear music, I hear people talking, I hear people walking, there may be something going on in the background, and you have to think about each one of those things and then how to fill it in so that when you watch it in a film, it feels as realistic as if you were there. And so that's kind of the goal.
Here's a crazy. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Here's a crazy bit of trivia, just so for people who do sound design and sound effects. The one of the sound designers on the Star Wars Return of the Jedi, he was in a hotel room with a very noisy air conditioner, and he thought that sounded cool, and he recorded that, and that ended up being the reactor in the middle of the Death Star later on after some processing.
It was an air conditioner in a hotel.
Yeah, that was keeping him awake, so he decided, screw it, I'll just record it.
And the laser guns for Star Wars was
that's a classic.
They got to these power lines, these sort of metal wires that are stretched over time, and they would hit it with like a metal stick, and the sound that it made, that sort of pew, that sound, they recorded that, and that became the laser gun sound for Star Wars. So if you see stormtroopers shooting in Star Wars, that's somebody hitting on a telephone line, basically.
I actually hit some of those lines in my neighborhood after watching that behind the scenes, and I had no idea if that was dangerous or not. But for a while, let me make the laser sound.
Yeah. Be careful out there. Don't try that at home.
Yeah. Please, we're not trying to promote execution here.
Yeah, for sure. So like the sound design for audio drama and podcasts, which is the sort of thing I'm doing in Marvel Wastelanders. Yeah. So in that, there is no video. There's no visual at all. So in that one, you have to really be super detailed in the sound design because literally everything you hear is the only way you process the story. So you're trying to make things sound as full and as detailed as possible, but you have the most creativity because you're able to use music and sound to tell a story. And so you want to engage the audience's imagination so that they actually sort of visualize it happening, even if they can't actually see it.
I got to ask, just before you go over here, I got to ask though, how did you feel as a comic book nerd to be presented with an opportunity to do a Marvel podcast?
I was so excited, you guys. I can't even tell you. They told me it was going to happen, and I was like jumping up and down.
I can see you giddy now. Even still, you're still giddy. You're like, oh man.
It was so amazing. I was so excited about it. They were like, you're going to write, themes for Marvel heroes, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is something I've always wanted to do. So I was thrilled.
Right, because you get to write all these individual themes for each character.
It's true. And not only that, the way Marvel Wastelanders is set up, it's kind of, so the show is set in a futuristic world where the Earth has sort of been destroyed for the most part. And now the people that we think of as villains, like Dr. Doom, he's now basically in charge of the world, and everybody thinks he's amazing. And all of the heroes are actually sort of hunted villains. There are people who are, they're considered bad guys to the world at large. They're being hunted by these people. And so I'm kind of trying to score that sort of futuristic world of these heroes sort of being bad guys at the time. But at the same time, there are all of these sort of like fantasy sequences where we go back to what their glory days when they were these amazing superheroes. And then I have to write music that feels like, that feels like current Marvel music, that feels like big and orchestral and really symphonic and like gets you super excited to see them. So I feel like it's the best of both worlds that I get to write this weird sort of glitchy music on one hand, but also the classic Marvel superhero themes on the other.
And isn't that cool, folks? It's available right now on Apple Podcasts. Check it out right there.
There it is.
I mean, the episodes is out. I mean, customer reviews, they're loving it. Loving it.
Excellent. That is so great.
Now
Isn't it?
You've got all this script to work with and all that, but did you actually I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, but it looks like it's very much inspired by the Old Man Logan setting. So were you familiar with that particular story? Did you get a chance to read that and sort of get into the mindset?
Yeah, I think that's kind of where Wastelanders comes from, because the way the series is structured, right? There are 4 podcast series that happened in Marvel's Wastelanders before the one I did. So there's a Logan one, there's a Hawkeye one, a Black Widow one, and a Doctor Doom one. And Star-Lord, that's the other one. And then in the Marvel Wastelanders series that I did, it's like all of them come together as a team to fight this other common enemy. So this is like the big, like, final battle for all of those series to come together. So this is like the big grand finale of the Wastelanders series.
What inspired you? What were you looking for in inspiration on this thing? Because I mean, this is the final battle type of joint. You must have been like amped up, like, oh my God, this is like,
super amped up, man. And it's like, when you're having to do these massive battles that are really like the battle between good and evil, you really want to create music that feels epic, that feels intense, so that hopefully you're feeling how important the battle is, but you're also feeling like the energy of everyone who's involved in the battle and how sort of like intense the battle is. That's the trick of the music, is being able to give background to what's happening, but also be able to give a window into how the emotions of the people who are in that moment feel. And that's, you're trying to make you feel the same way as those people. That's the trick to it.
I tell you, it's so amazing to think about, like, when we have these iconic pieces of music, when we think about the theme from Superman or the Hammer of Crom from Conan, like, this music just continues to live with you. The Star Trek music, and now it's fallen on you to create something that is epic, that, I don't know if you have an aspiration of that, but like, just think like this might live on well past me, and people remember it, and they've bought the album of it, and they just listen to it again and again. To have something that's just, it just lives with you like that, and it just impacts people that way.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest with you, it's a lot of pressure. I mean, because like John Williams' score for Star Wars and Indiana Jones and Jaws, like things that are those iconic scores, like I could sing 5 notes of any one of those scores and you'd know what it was right away.
Right.
Because they're so, like, they're ingrained in everything we think about in movies today. So like, yeah, you really want to like try to live up to that sort of like standard that's been set by these amazing composers, including all of those Marvel films, because I love the scores for those films. And you want it to feel like the kind of music you're writing could live alongside of that music, and people could say, yeah, that sounds like it could be in a Marvel film. But at the same time, like, you have to only think about that every so often, or otherwise you will totally freak yourself out and you won't be able to write anything. So
that makes perfect sense.
I try to like just stay as much in touch with, okay, who are these characters? What are they going through? What's the music that relates to them? And not get too much in the headspace of like, okay, this has to be the most amazing music of all time, or I'm a failure. You know what I mean? Like, it's a tricky line to cross.
Now, what I love about this is you're not just a composer, but you're also a sound designer. So you don't just create a soundtrack, but you also create a soundscape. And when we think of things like this, which are audio dramas, which I absolutely love, uh, we know how music can affect the audience. Like when you hear that bum bum from Jaws, like
That's the most
it just
important thing for me.
yeah, it clicks something primal because music can cue the audience into what to expect or what to feel. And so now you're putting all this together as well as like character themes. Like talk about that a little bit if you would.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, one of the most challenging things of doing Marvel Wastelanders is that because it is an audio only story, you have to be really specific about, the choices you make so that you can really send the correct message and cue the audience at the right times for the things you're doing. I was super lucky to work with this sound design team. I just did the music for Wastelanders, and I work with the sound design team called 1000 Birds, who are this great collective of sound designers. And we had a lot of conversations throughout the process of like, when we get to certain parts, to be like, okay, I'm thinking I'm going to do this. What are you guys going to do here? You know what I mean? Like, what are you thinking in terms of like, let's make our music and sound fit together so that we're really presenting a full package. So it was a real interesting collaboration to sort of figure out how that worked. And one of the biggest challenges is that there are places where Doom sort of flexes his powers, or Valeria Richards, who is the daughter of Reed Richards. She's sort of like a main villain in this piece. And she has these incredible powers. Like when somebody can do these incredible mental telepathy sort of things with their mind to control physical space, what does that sound like?
Right. How do you represent that?
Yeah. How do you do that? So
how do you do that? That's right. What the hell did you do again for me to know? Like, okay, this lady is like about to destroy something with her brain.
Yeah.
What are you digging into?
It's really fascinating. And I mean, I think the way we wound up, we never really said this to each other between me and 1000 Birds, but basically sort of like my music would be like the represent the power of it. You know what I mean? The sort of mental force. And then they were really good at illustrating how that mental force would affect physical objects. You know what I mean? Like smashing and glittering and stuff like that, so that we sort of worked that way in a way so that I'm like creating the sort of power and they're creating the force, if that makes sense.
Yes.
No, I get that. Being a student of film and therefore other media like that, I love the collaborative process, how like one department feeds into another. It's just really astounding hearing how this all goes. Yeah,
it's pretty cool. I mean, I have to say probably the collaborative process is my favorite of all of these things. Like when I play in a rock band, basically I'm writing music that is just for me and just for the band. And then ultimately whatever we've come up with, that's it. But when you're writing music for a project like Wastelanders or film or theater, you're really having to not only be like, okay, is this a good piece of music? But also like, does this piece of music really affect the media in the way that we want? Is it generating the right emotions? Is it supporting the character's performances rather than overshadowing it? So you're really having to like gauge a lot of things of like how your piece of the puzzle sort of fits into the larger project. It's a really interesting, it's a fascinating project to have.
Yeah, it's weird. It sounds like you're almost like I've done some work as an art director, so like you're a sound director, you're like the showrunner for all this audio coming together and trying to like keep everything right where you want it.
Yeah, totally. That's actually true. Yeah, it's really fun, but and I mean, I love the job, because it's never not interesting. There's always something you have to be like on your toes about all the time. So I feel like I'm always learning when I do it.
I mean, I imagine so. Like
he's going to be the Jack Kirby of sound design over here. Look at him.
I would love that, man.
Have that sort of moniker. Heck yeah. I mean, because like when I look at all the things that you've been into, from producing your own music to theater to TV to audio dramas
I
to
mean, Tony
music.
nominated. My gosh, I
Thank
mean,
you.
what?
I mean, you are all over the place. You have traveled all over the world doing work. I imagine that you are never bored. But do you have a favorite thing you do out of all of that? Is there anything that really just like this appeals to me a little bit more than everything else in some way?
I mean, theater is kind of like where I started. So for me, that feels like my home to a certain degree. But, I love it all. I really do. And I love the different challenges of it. And the things that are different about each of these mediums are what keep it interesting for me. Like right now, I'm writing music for a film. I'm writing music for a play, and I'm writing music for a podcast, and so like I'm like trying to keep all of those projects straight, but each one of them operates just slightly differently in my brain, and that keeps me interested and excited. So I'm happy to do any of it.
Since you mentioned that, let's talk about that for a second, because I find this evolution really interesting. Theater to movies or TV, very natural progression. But podcast, I would not have thought of like a sound director, if you will, getting involved in podcasts. But this has really become a prevalent source of entertainment media these days.
I mean, to be totally honest,
radio, you mean?
Yeah, it really is.
They brought back radio dramas, which I love. Like The Edge of Nightfall with E.G. Marshall and stuff like that.
It's so true. I have to say, probably before the pandemic, I had done maybe one podcast. And then suddenly when the pandemic hit, live theater closed up and basically films were working at a much lower level. And so suddenly everyone was like, let's do podcasts. And I was like, okay, cool. And I didn't really know, I had never really done them. So I was just like, I'm just going to jump in and figure this out. And now,
that's pretty much the Hollywood way. You just say yes and figure it out once you get the job.
As you should.
Exactly it.
That's life, not just Hollywood.
Yeah, dude, that's my entire career. As God is my witness, that is what I've done.
Can you do it? Absolutely. Google.
Let's go. We'll figure it out when we get there. So, I mean, I really have gotten into podcasts full force since 2020, and now podcasts are a big part of my life in a way that they weren't before the pandemic, but I'm loving it. I really do. I think the stories are cool. There's a tremendous amount of creativity and you're using audio to tell a story. Like at the end of the day, if I don't put it in there, it's not in there. So you have to really you got to really be on your game to make it work, but that's what makes it exciting for me.
It's so exciting to see this art form be brought back, from the days of the Red Rider, The Shadow, and all these wonderful things.
Totally.
I just kind of love how entertainment just kind of cycles back around eventually.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, the funny thing is I used to do radio dramas because in theater, what we used to do is we would do radio dramas where you would have a live group of people on the stage and there would be a live Foley person there.
Oh, like a Prairie Home Companion with Kerrison,
like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
We used to do that kind of thing occasionally, and I would do Foley for that. And I love that stuff. And I thought, I thought that was the only way we were ever going to go back to those radio dramas ever. But now here we are in 2023, and I'm producing music for a Marvel, audio drama that's like as epic as any movie you're going to watch. And it's so cool to see this art form not only return, but they're really sort of improving on it. And it's it's in a whole new level now. It's really, really cool.
Definitely.
Now, where's your rechargeable Model T? Come on.
For people who haven't seen it yet, as part of my research, I did watch some snippets of this or listen to it, and it sounds amazing. I mean, you have a great cast, and of course, the music and all the sound that's adding to all of this is just fantastic. So well done, sir.
Thank you very much. Like I said, I'm just a small part of it with the music. And there's an amazing.
Don't ever discredit yourself like that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. No, I'm part of the team, but I have to say the team of this did an incredible job. I'm really, really proud of how it
It
turned
takes a
out.
village,
Yeah,
absolutely. But don't you
yeah.
ever discredit yourself, because for me, music, is everything,
Thank you.
in life. So, of course, it does carry the vibe and the energy of a film. So, you're responsible for that soul moving.
Yeah.
Scare the shit out of us, because all of a sudden, when your music ain't playing, we know something's popping off. All of a sudden, the music stop. No.
Yeah, it's
That's
like when
right.
you're in the woods and everything gets quiet, everybody gets nervous.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
There is a moment like that actually in Marvel Wastelanders at the end of episode 2. There's probably my favorite piece of music in the series. Is there a moment where these two sort of like collectors, and they're out in the middle of this sort of desolate valley, and they're just looking around for stuff. They're trying to figure out, they're looking for like metal or something like that. And then all of a sudden out of the darkness appears the Thing, and he's coming straight towards them to attack them. And like, that is absolutely my favorite moment, is like just the Thing coming in front of him and him saying it's clobbering time as the music sort of increases right as he's getting towards them. I love that stuff, man. That's
so
my
what
favorite.
what music did you think of when you thought of the Thing?
The Thing is like huge
Instantly.
drums and horns. Okay. Yeah, it feels like a freight train coming toward you, basically, is what it feels
okay.
like.
Oh,
yeah, it's awesome. It's really, really fun.
What I like is I'm a sucker for a good villain theme.
Yeah.
And so I like Doctor Doom's music quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's like trying to figure out your own sort of Darth Vader sort of theme going on there.
Totally.
But it's my understanding that you have a favorite, and Star-Lord seems to be your guy, and you have to kind of balance the drama and the funny with a character like that.
Oh my God, I love Star-Lord in this. He's played by Timothy Busfield. He's hilarious. And he's kind of like, whereas everybody else is fairly serious, like nobody's ever going to accuse Wolverine of being a real laugh riot. But like Star-Lord is like totally cracking jokes the whole time, and just kind of going off into misadventures, and everyone's trying to keep him from getting killed, basically. And so like it's really fun to like score that kind of energy, the kind of energy you're like, I don't really care, I'm just going to do whatever I want, it's going to be fine, who cares. And also the other cool thing about Star-Lord is he's still DJing through this whole thing. So he like goes to parties and DJ stuff, and like is constantly getting in fights with people at the parties while he's DJing.
Are you a DJ, Mr. Jones, too? As well?
I used to be a long time ago. Yeah.
Of course he
look. I mean, look at him. He looks like a DJ. I'm not trying to stereotype you. I'm just saying,
I appreciate that.
People that vibe. You have that DJ look, that music dude look. You know what I mean?
I used to do it for a living, a long time ago. But yeah, I gave that up a while back.
So I mean, for a living, like radio or mobile, or both?
I started in radio. When I was 14, I sort of lied my way into my first job. I worked for
Who didn't?
I did. I told them I was 16, and they believed me. And so I worked.
It was the beard, bro.
It was the beard. Yeah, I didn't have it then. I worked for WSEZ in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and my job was to work on Sunday mornings from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. I would play, like, there used to be in the 80s, like they'd have like these Christian rock programs that they would put on. Mm-hmm. So you'd like, they'd play music, and then they'd be like, yeah, Jesus is like rock music or whatever that is. And so no one wanted that job. So I used to do that. And so the thing is that the records that they would supply for those Christian rock shows were usually 3.5 hours. But I had a 4-hour shift. So I would play those records for 3.5 hours. And then for the last half hour, I got to play whatever music I wanted. And because nobody was awake on Sunday morning at that time, I totally got to play all my favorite bands from the 80s.
He went from Christian music to the devil's music.
That's exactly right.
That last half hour.
Come on. You weren't just throwing on another Striper record?
I was not. I was like putting on like The Cult and Susie and the Banshees and The Cure at 7:30 in the morning on Sunday.
That's 180 degrees.
Yeah, for sure. I was, but I love it.
I'm loving this. Yeah, man. What a rebel. That's what it is, man. LJ, baby, the rebel of the Carolinas.
Thank you.
I
I'll
love
tell
it.
you one thing I find that's really important about Star Lord in there
Yeah.
is that particular sitting is really grim, really gritty. A lot of terrible things happen, but Star Lord gives you those moments of decompression, and
Yeah.
not just the character's actor, but of course the music, and it gives you a chance to lighten the mood, especially when he starts DJing and things like that. And you're like, oh, okay, we can catch our breath before the next terrible thing happens.
It's true. And I think, the thing about Marvel, and I may get myself in trouble here, but I feel like the difference between Marvel comics and DC comics is that Marvel has a sense of humor. They have these characters that are funny, and like the Thing is funny. They're always they've always got this kind of wisecracking attitude that's part of their entire presentation, and there's something about that's the sort of Marvel recipe, I guess, that it is like intense action, but also moments of really funny humor, sort of like sarcasm, things like that you wouldn't think superheroes would do, but as you say, it's a perfect release. It sort of like gives you a chance to decompress before the next big battle happens.
I mean, honestly, that's what always made Spider-Man my favorite character, is because he would not just beat you up, but he'd be talking smack on you the whole time he was doing it.
That's right. Your friendly
Lindsay,
neighborhood Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I want to ask Lindsay. So when you get the script, like how much time do you have to actually, read through the script to understand where you're gonna go directionally with it?
So it depends based on the project. Sometimes I get them way in advance. With Marvel, I got them a pretty good time in advance. Usually, I think it was about I got it about 2 or 3 months before the stuff got to me. Because the thing is that when you're creating a podcast, like an audio drama, the process is they write the script, then they record the actors. Then the actors go to a dialogue edit, right? Where basically they take all of the recorded dialogue and they cut it up and make the story out of it. Then that goes to sound design and they put the initial sounds on there. And then that comes to me and I create the music that's around it. So like the scripts are finished way in advance because I'm basically the last stop before it's done. So that's an interesting sort of part of the thing, is that and what's happening in way Wastelanders operated was I would get sent the dialogue edit, and that would give me ideas for the music. And then I would get sent the first pass of sound effects. And then from that point on, I'm doing first pass of music. They're doing second pass of sound effects. I'm doing second pass of music. They're doing third pass of sound effects. I'm doing third pass of music. And then in theory, it's all set by that point.
Yeah, because you really need to be the last stop, because what you do is going to be determined by what everybody else is doing, by the actor's presentation and the sound cues that are going on as well.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, the thing about music, right, is in addition to music having to connect to the performances and connect to the story, music is a thing that it's a fixed length. In other words, it still needs to sound like music. If I just am putting in various musical accents with no kind of correlation of time and space, it's going to sound weird. So it has to sound like a song, but that song has to be perfectly timed to land at all of the right moments where it needs to do the things it does. And so that's where my experience in film scoring really becomes incredibly helpful, because when you're watching a film, you're basically one of the first steps of scoring for film is you're creating something called hit points, which are like, okay, what are the moments I want to accent with the music, with when the edit shifts, or when something on screen happens, a big action or something that you want to accentuate. So you essentially create the hit points first and then write the music so that it fits to those hit points. And so that's what you're doing with audio drama, is you've got these sound effects and this dialogue, and you're trying to write music that will land as those things land at the same time.
And this will also create cohesion, because I'll tell you, like when you get a piece of music that's inappropriately, like a big thing in Hollywood is to take like, oh, what's the popular music and slap it in. It doesn't fit the scene at all. It takes you right out.
I know. And that's the thing is people don't really understand how important music is until it's wrong. And then they know right away.
Yeah.
Of course, they never appreciate it when it's good, but man, when it's bad, they start hitting it, right?
When it's bad, they know right away. I mean, that's the thing is you always know. And so it's one of those things where as a musician, as a composer and a musician, you're really trying to say to people like, hey, I know like this seems like a lot of work now, but trust me, you're going to be happy at the end of this if we take the time to make this.
I always say I find it funny when I see a film, and if it's a black person, they put hip hop immediately. If it's a Spanish person, you hear some salsa in the background like that. Listen, if you look at me, if you see my library, you'd be surprised what's on my library. Then I could go from Beethoven to bachata to some hip hop to some heavy metal to some gospel. Give it to me, baby. I love it all. Don't
that's awesome.
Typing me.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So you gotta like. That's the thing is you gotta. If I was gonna score you, Al, I'd have to really like. Be like, okay, I can't just look at Al and make one decision about how he looks. I got to know more about how Al thinks and how.
Give me some hip hop, heavy metal. I would love that. Give me some MOP, some Wu-Tang. You give me some Rage Against the Machine, some Metallica. Give me all that good stuff. You know what I mean?
I'm on it. I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Next week.
Since we're coming close to our time, I want to talk about some projects that are outside of the Wastelanders. One thing in particular. We've got this Dinosaur Discovery, which sounds really, really cool, and it reminds me of the ride at Universal, like where Spider-Man jumps out of the screen and like lands on your little flying car sort of thing. Tell us something about that.
It's so cool. Okay, so this thing, I'm not quite sure when it's opening. They're working on creating it right now in Houston. But the hope is that it's going to be at the Natural Sciences Museum of Houston, and then it's going to go to different museums around the country. But essentially, if you guys remember a few years ago at the Super Bowl when Tupac, the hologram of Tupac appeared at the Super Bowl. So it's that same technology that made Tupac appear, except that they're going to put dinosaurs. And so the idea is you're watching a film and you see dinosaurs, and then all of a sudden with holograms, they basically come right off the screen into the house because they're using holograms.
That's amazing.
So it is like an epic sort of Jurassic Park like movie, but it's beyond 3D. It's like 4D. It's like they're coming, they're all off the screen. It's super, super cool.
That alien technology since they're coming already.
Yeah, that's right. It's coming.
Did you create any of the sound for that as well as the music for it?
I just did the music. I didn't deal with the sound on that, but the sound
I was
pretty
curious
awesome.
to see how you were gonna what's your take on dinosaur sounds? How's your approach? Because I know the Jurassic Park approach.
Well, yeah, right. And that's the thing is it's interesting how I had to go back to the sound designer and be like, you're going to do the sound of really heavy footsteps here, right? Because I'm going to make this music of this big epic thing coming. And so it only works if what you're going to do and what I'm going to do is going to fit together. But I had a great relationship with everybody on that, and it worked out really well. So I'm super jacked for that thing to come out. I can't wait to see it.
And you've also done a lot of amazing work with Shakespeare, even for the Royal Academy.
It's true. Yeah. I've now done 36 out of 37 William Shakespeare plays. I just finished my 36th one this past week, Winter's Tale, and I have one Shakespeare play left to do. So I'm hoping to do that in the next few years. It's Two Gentlemen of Verona. So if anybody out there is doing a production, Two Gentlemen of Verona, and you need music and sound design, call me. Go to my website and find me.
Right there. That website right there, LindsayJones.com, folks. Right there.
That's it.
Be like Blondie. Call me.
Yeah. I don't want to take too much more of your time, Lindsay. So this is what I want to do, folks. You got to first support people like this. You know what I mean? Because, again, I dare you watch a movie with no music. I promise you will be bored to death. So appreciate my man like Lindsay that does amazing work like that keeps us thoroughly engaged with all our.
I would like to ask one more question, if I may.
Oh, you got one? Go ahead. Yeah. I'm gonna keep pimping. You got Lindsay Jones.
One more thing, because this is another thing I'm interested in. I'd like Lindsay to pimp as well. The Imagined Neighborhood.
Oh yeah. So that's a
what's
weekly.
that? Ooh.
So that is a weekly podcast. It is for elementary school age children. It's an audio
nice.
drama where you can learn about feelings and emotions through these crazy stories that happen. And I provide the music and sound design for that every week.
Cool.
So if you've got young kids in your life, I highly recommend it. It's usually about 20 minutes long, but it's so funny and so much fun. And it's designed to help kids better understand who they are and how they feel about things. And I think it's a really, really awesome show.
Oh, that is cool. What inspired that, man?
So that is actually a show that is run by a friend of mine, Scotty Iseri, who is...
Shout out, Scotty.
Yeah, he's amazing. So he developed the show with the Committee for Children back in 2020. And it's actually, that was sort of like the first podcast series I started working on. And it has been such a great ride working with them. The show is so hilarious. And every week I get to do crazy sound effects and crazy music. You know, they do lots of stories with robots and superheroes and all sorts of stuff. Like they pull out all the stops and it is hilarious.
You kind of get your Looney Tunes on. Totally.
Awesome. It is amazing. But if you've got a young kid in your life, somebody who's like 5 to 10, it is an awesome show for kids.
There we heard you heard it there, folks. You heard it there, folks. And you can probably keep up to date on all that goodness. On all the socials right there, Mr. Lindsay Jones, and of course,
come find me.
Facebook then. There's Lindsay Jones Music and Sound on Facebook or Meta, whatever you want to call it nowadays. It's confused as to what it wants to be called, apparently.
Totally.
But thank you so much, Lindsay. I appreciate your time. From as a fan to a creator, I want to say thank you so much for your contributions and everything that you do, for sharing your talent and your skill, for keeping us entertained and engaged in the things that you create. So, God bless you on your journey, man. I appreciate the hell out of it, man. I can't wait to see what else we got coming from the Jones verse of sound.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you both so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's so great to talk to you guys, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
My pleasure.
Big shout out to Chris right there. That's Chris Crash. That's my baby bro right there, Chris Crash. All right. He the sneaker whiz, toy whiz. Chris Crash podcast coming soon once again, or it better be, all right? So with that, Jeff, thank you again. Lindsay, rock out. Everybody, I'm sharing the links below. And Lindsay, please send me the link about that the kids show. I definitely want to share that as well with the community, because I know all of us geeks want to have that moment where, hey, watch this while we read our comics. We need that moment of peace. Hey, watch this. So if it's that good, thank you for doing us a service, if you will. Keep them kids quiet while we read.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it.
Amazing.
Excellent.
Blessed, brother. You know what it is. Bracey, you rock. My people, you know what it is. Check out the Comic Crusaders, Undercover Caves. My man Bracey over here on Cinema Crusaders, Sloppy Spoilers. And what's that project that's out now on Indiegogo?
Oh, well.
What is that? What is that, Bracey?
It is Blood World.
Wepa, look at that.
Our sci-fi, 80-page sci-fi anthology. You can get the digital edition for just $10, and plus a number of digital comics that have been added by other indie creators as well for just $13. You can get a lot of stuff for a very low amount of money, and it's great high concept sci-fi.
And there you go. Support independent creators of all levels, mi gente. Hasta la próxima. Much love, mi gente. It was another Comic Crusaders podcast. Wepa! Thank you for listening to the Comic Crusaders podcast. If you like the content, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Also, please visit ComicCrusaders.com and our extended podcast family over at UndercoverCapes.com. And also, make sure to download the Comic Crusaders app on the Google Play Store today.